Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today as we talk about how you can be a global champion for women and girls. Just by joining today, you are taking an important step to learning more about issues facing women and girls around the world so that you can help raise awareness and support for the vital work that they're doing, either by giving to Global Impact's Women and Girls Fund or one of our amazing charity partners, two of which I have here with me today. My name is Brittany Craig, and I will be moderating today's discussion. At Global Impact, our mission is to inspire greater giving, and I hope that we will be living out our mission here today and inspiring you. A few housekeeping items before we begin. Your line will be on mute to avoid distractions, but we want you to utilize the chat and the questions functions. Share your reflections, reactions in the chat, and post your questions to the panelists throughout today's session. You can also vote up or down other questions to highlight what you want to hear more from one of our panelists. I will moderate the first half of the call, and then I will turn to your questions so to share them as they arise. All right, so let's get started. I'm excited to introduce Michelle Van Aiken, who is a disaster risk management team member, child protection and gender-based violence specialist at Plan International, and Zaid Douglas, a technical advisor for gender integration at World Vision US. So first, Michelle and Zaid, tell me 3 things that everyone needs to know about your organizations.
Great. Thank you so much for that question. So first and foremost, you should know that Plan International US is a girls' rights organization, and that we work in international development and in humanitarian assistance, so in conflict and post-conflict settings. Second, Plan puts girls at the center of our design, implementation, and evaluation of programming. The voices of girls inform our works, and by placing girls at the center and working to both empower them and strengthen the layers of support surrounding them, including their families and the communities, we are building their resilience. This is particularly important in our humanitarian work, where we are responding to sudden onset crises. And third, Plan is a federation. And what does this mean? This means that we have offices around the world, including programs in 75 countries. And through our 240 field offices, we are able to, our work is grounded in local expertise. And this means that we have built trust with the communities and have developed programming in coordination and in cooperation with these communities that is sustainable in the long term. This is particularly important because Plan is committed to community-based approaches and a child-centered community development model. And I would say, so those are the 3 most important things. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Michelle. See, what about World Vision?
Thank you, Brittany, for that question. Well, like Plan, World Vision is a humanitarian development advocacy organization. We have programming in nearly 100 countries around the world. And as a humanitarian organization, we respond to emergencies driven by various entities, whether it's like conflict, natural disasters, or emergencies such as COVID-19. As a development organization, we're in it for the long haul, where we're supporting communities in low to middle income countries to work towards improved well-being and improved quality of life. And, you know, we have grown as an organization. Our initial start was during that of the Korean War, where we were supporting orphans and vulnerable children. We go into those places where few venture in, and we work and have extended relations and build trust with those communities. Second, as I mentioned earlier, we are a humanitarian development advocacy. We're also a Christian organization. We're faith-based and we're child-focused. We work with children, families, and communities to ensure that they are able to lift themselves from poverty and all forms of injustice. But as Christians, our faith does mandate that we serve on need, and regardless of religion, race, ethnicity, gender, but we don't proselytize. But what we are able to do as a faith-based organization, we do understand the role that faith plays. And this gives us a unique role in engaging with faith communities and leaders. Lastly, I want to mention that we have programming across a multitude of sectors, whether it's health, water, sanitation, food, security, livelihoods. And the reason why is like, we believe that addressing these various areas are core to transformational development and in turn, like sustainable development. We also have a large child sponsorship programming that enables us to carry out this development work. And we've worked with a variety of entities, whether it's public, like US government, other country governments, multilateral, such as the Global Fund, and private, such as foundations and high net worth individuals. And if you didn't know this, World Vision is actually the largest non-governmental organization provider of clean water, where every 10 seconds, someone is accessing water from one of our water points. And we are the largest NGO partner for the World Food Program.
Very interesting. Thank you both. So many little fun facts in there to learn about your organizations. Both of you, I know, have incredible backgrounds and expertise on this topic. So I wanted to share with our audience, if you could share with our audience a little bit on how you both came to your jobs and roles at your organizations. And Michelle, why don't we start with you first?
Sure. I'm actually laughing because it's actually the movie Black Hawk Down, directed by Ridley Scott, that got me, at least sparked me to get where I am today. I saw it with my parents when I was about 14, and the first 3 minutes of the film gives you background on the civil war in Somalia and the man-made famine that has killed millions of people, and how food aid is being diverted by armed groups. And I just remember feeling enraged. And I asked my parents, like, is this true? Is this real? And I just couldn't believe it. And that drove me to become more interested in international affairs. And I lacked the vocabulary at that time to know what exactly I wanted to do. But I knew that I wanted to help people in situations where traditional structures of support, such as their government, weren't working. So that led me to studying and working hard to identifying what would that mean for me personally. And eventually I did a master's at Sciences Po in Paris in human rights and humanitarian action. So to really build up my theoretical knowledge and to gain some more educational experience. Following my master's, I did 5 years of field work, starting in Jordan and then also working in South Sudan, Iraq, and Myanmar. And I very quickly specialized in child protection and sexual and gender-based violence. For the same reason that I initially was sparked to work in this sector in the first place, because I am driven to support those most impacted by man-made disasters, such as conflicts or even natural disasters. And women and children, due to their gender and their age, are very frequently most vulnerable to the negative impacts of conflict. So that's how I've ended up here working with Plan. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Michelle. And I think for many of us, that could be a very similar story. Zaid, how about you?
Well, I think what inspired me in my pursuit of a career working with women and girls was my mother. Obviously, my mother being a constant influence in my life. My mother is an immigrant from Ethiopia, and she grew up in relatively impoverished circumstances, yet she was able to, lift herself from these circumstances into a life that flourished. And, growing up, she used to tell us certain things, and, I was a bit dubious. But I think after a period after graduate school where I spent an extended amount of time in Ethiopia, getting to know family for the first time, but also like trying to, really utilize those skills that I acquired in graduate school. I got my master's in public policy with a focus in international health policy from the University of Chicago. I was able to volunteer at an organization that does work with reproductive health. It's doing research on adolescent reproductive health issues. But two, I got to know my family, that side of the family. And it was during that time, I really got to understand what my mom was saying, like, as a woman, you can't go to certain places at night, or, you had to make, if you were seen in a place, like a restaurant or something after certain hours, someone might have certain perceptions about you. It really didn't click to me about like those issues around like mobility, those issues around like agency, like understanding like what choices my mom had to make growing up to get to where she was. Like, for example, she was the only one of her sisters that chose her husband. All of my aunts were married at an early age. And it really like propelled me to like say like, okay, I have this knowledge, I've seen this, and I want to do better and I want to understand. And so I pursued coming back to the States. I, went on to look for careers that would allow me to bring my experience in research, but also in international development around gender issues. And I ended up working at a think tank for almost 10 years, focused on gender equality. And then I moved into like wanting to work in an organization that does implementation across a variety of sectors. And that's how I ended up at World Vision.
Wow, incredible, incredible stories, and such an amazing opportunity to be connected to your family and to that history as well. So now I want to dive a little bit more into some of your programs. So Zaid, will start with you, and I want you to tell me about one of your current programs or one of the most pressing issues that is facing women and girls today. I think we're going to get a screen share rolling too. Maybe while we're getting that set up, do you want Michelle to go first, maybe? Michelle, why don't we have you go first?
Sure, that sounds good. I'm happy to jump in. So today I'd like to talk about sexual and gender-based violence in conflict and displacement settings, focusing on the specific needs of child survivors of sexual and gender-based violence, and particularly girls. Before beginning, I want to quickly review two key definitions, which I am also pasting in the chat for everyone's reference. First, sexual and gender-based violence is any act that is perpetrated against a person's will that is based on gender norms and unequal power relationships. And it encompasses threats of violence and coercion. It can be physical, emotional, psychological, or sexual in nature, and it can also take the form of denial of resources or access to services. And sexual and gender-based violence inflicts harm on men, women, boys, and girls. But I will be focusing on child survivors. And a child survivor is a person under the age of 18 who has experienced any form of sexual and gender-based violence. I've decided to focus on this because we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the conflict in Ethiopia. Conflict has been ongoing in the northern region of Tigray for nearly a year at this point, and over 2 million people have been displaced by the conflict so far. I do have to say that at this time, due to the sensitivity of the topic and planned ongoing programming, I cannot share too much information or details. But what I can say is that based on reports from the region, we know that this conflict and ongoing displacement is having a devastating impact on girls. There have been alarming reports of sexual and gender-based violence, and women and children in affected areas are reporting significant challenges in accessing health, social welfare, and justice services. So while we do lack data, we do know that sexual and gender-based violence is one of the most pressing issues facing women and girls in Tigray, but not just in Tigray, but other conflict areas as well. It is widespread, but it is often hidden and underreported. In humanitarian settings, gathering data on how often sexual and gender-based violence is occurring is extremely hard to do, and actually it's not encouraged because of the sensitive nature of the topic. And collecting data and doing research on SGBV, if done poorly, can re-traumatize survivors and actually put them at risk of violence. So what we do is we assume sexual and gender-based violence is happening, even if we don't receive reports about it, because we don't want to put women and girls more at risk. And while all children can experience sexual and gender-based violence, both boys and girls, we also know that girls are disproportionately affected by gender-based violence due to their gender and their age. Globally, girls are up to 3 times more likely than boys to experience sexual violence. And As one example, data from Doctors Without Borders in Central African Republic reported that 95% of survivors of sexual and gender-based violence were female, and of those, 52% were girls. So clearly this is an issue that severely impacts girls, and it also impacts their ability to access their rights and to grow, learn, and be empowered. However, it is also extremely difficult for girls to seek help, even more difficult perhaps than for adult women. The vast majority of sexual and gender-based violence against children is perpetrated by someone known to the child in a familiar location. And children may not disclose sexual abuse due to fear of consequences or not being believed, or they may be manipulated by the perpetrator. They may blame themselves for what happened, or they may actually be trying to protect the perpetrator or their own family. And perpetrators take advantage of these vulnerabilities in children. They take advantage of their developmental state, their emotional, mental, and physical developmental state to kind of, pressure them not to report. Together for Girls found that in Nigeria, only 38% of girls who experienced sexual violence told someone about it, and only 5% sought services, and only 4% received services. So clearly there is this large gap, both in terms of reporting, then also being able to seek help and receive help. And this has a huge impact on girls. Survivors of sexual and gender-based violence are often forced to drop out of school. These girls are prevented from accessing income-generating opportunities, and they ultimately face social exclusion. And it's even more stark when girls become pregnant and could be then forced to marry the perpetrator. And they become trapped in a cycle of extreme poverty and increased vulnerability to exploitation. So PLAN, as a girls' rights organization and a child protection organization, is extremely concerned by this. We are also uniquely well equipped to work with child survivors. When we think of traditional GBV programs, gender-based violence programs, they're often designed with adult women in mind. However, the skill sets and knowledge needed to work with children are not the same skill sets and knowledge needed to work with adults. So you wouldn't ask a college professor to try to teach a classroom full of kindergartners. I just don't think that would go well. But however, PLAN staff, as we specialize in child protection, we have the knowledge and skills and attitudes needed to support girl survivors of SGBV. Our work is based on child development theories and the specific values and behaviors you need to display when you work with children. We've built up skills over the years in communicating with children, participatory methodologies that engage children and meet them at their level of mental, emotional, and physical development. And our work with child survivors leverages these existing skill sets to improve our work and our ability to positively impact the lives of child survivors. And bringing this back to Tigray, this existing skill set is of utmost importance to our work supporting girls in Tigray. PLAN is currently running a child protection program in Tigray that specifically seeks to also support child survivors. We're supporting them through provision of case management, which is essentially social work light, social work that's meant to be able to be implemented in a place where you don't have the same infrastructure that supports social work in the US, as well as through dignity kit distributions. And dignity kits support girls in maintaining their feminine hygiene, managing their periods, and also can be a gender-based violence risk mitigation tool. We're also supporting child survivors through life skills and recreational activities that are targeting all of the children in the sites that we're working in. And this is important because it means that girls aren't singled out or at risk of stigmatization, whereas they may be nervous about participating in gender-based violence activities that target women and girls, because they may feel like that makes them be singled out. So to conclude, we are deeply concerned about the safety and security of civilians, particularly children in the Tigray region. Measures to prevent gender-based violence and child protection risks must be urgently prioritized by all actors. And we are hoping, as planned, that we're able to support these needs through our ongoing programming. Thank you, Brittany.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. And I think it's so interesting. And I think, thinking about the work that you're doing as that social work light, being able to meet people where they're at and to be able to provide that service in the settings that are in these global settings, that's what's able. And then the dignity kits are just such a, I think, great example of one thing that I think as women we can all relate to, and understand how important that is. So thank you so much for sharing and for your work. All right, Zaid, we'll turn to you. All right, there we go. You can see your screen now.
Thank you, everyone. So I am going to talk a little bit about one pressing issue, which is child marriage and what we at World Vision are doing to address this. So one pressing issue that we find today is child marriage, and child marriage is simply marriage before the age of majority in respective country. And you might not know this, but child marriage is a form of gender-based violence. And as Michelle had indicated earlier, gender-based violence is directed at someone because of their gender, and it capitalizes on these unequal power dynamics, whether these dynamics exist in societies and communities, in families, even in relationships. And according to Girls Not Brides, which is this global coalition that's dedicated to ending child marriage, and they have activities and support in over 100 countries. Every 2 seconds, a girl, which is a female under age 18, is married. And that translates into roughly 15 million girls that are married before they're of age in their home country. And another form of gender-based violence that often coincides with child marriage is female genital mutilation, or FGM for short. And what FGM is removal of all or parts of the female genitalia by cutting for reasons that are not medical. There are absolutely no medical benefits with FGM. And in fact, the practice comes with these long-term devastating effects, physical, psychological, to the girl. And in fact, over 200 million girls and women around the world have experienced FGM in their lifetime. In some communities, FGM is done in preparation when the girl reaches puberty, marking her transition into adulthood. And essentially, this is preparing her for marriage, and which occurs shortly after she's been cut. So when a woman or girl has been married early and then becomes pregnant, what exactly does that translate to? Well, early marriage as well as early pregnancy has severely detrimental impacts on girls. This includes threats to their physical and emotional well-being. This includes limiting their educational opportunities, as girls who marry early are more likely to drop out of school or complete fewer years of schooling compared to their peers who do so later in life. And overall, there are diminished life opportunities such as employment. And poverty also has been noted as a driver of child marriage, in that parents / caregivers or families that are experiencing extreme poverty may as a last resort make the difficult decision to marry off their girls in order to secure the bride price that might accompany that once the girl's hand has been given away. So World Vision has been working in West Pokot County. It's in Western Kenya for about 10 years now. And in this communities in this county, there are high rates of child marriage in FGM. And in order to address these issues, you first must address the root causes of these practices. So you need to understand how these issues came to be, why these practices continue, and you need to identify who's involved in continuing these practices before doing the what to end all of this. And the Kenya Big Dream Project, which has been supported by World Vision US, is the place and space where all this is happening. It is grounded in evidence, and through this project, Kenya Big Dream strives to enable girls as well as boys to live lives free from all forms of violence and to live life to their greatest potential. Kenya Big Dream takes a holistic, multi-sectorial approach to addressing these issues in the 4 communities in which it operates. One core activity is to ensure that these communities' children, whether girls or boys, become agents of change. So girls and boys are trained to raise awareness around child rights, around actions to end violence against children, as well as promoting alternative rites of passage, which is what they are. They're alternatives to those traditional practices that are part of the initiation process, marking that transition to adulthood. Children are equipped with information, they're equipped with skills to bring attention to these issues, targeting their peers, their parents, their families, the community. And girls who are at risk for or who have experienced FGM or have married early, they're able to participate in life skills and are supported to continue their education. Another core activity that we have within Kenya Big Dream is to supporting those households to protect their children from all forms of violence. And a lot of attention is around establishing or reinforcing structures to facilitate household resilience. This is whereby households are protected from experiencing shocks or unplanned events. And how the project has done this is by working with parents and caregivers to increase their savings, to have increased access to financial services, but also improve their livelihoods. A third core activity is around creating that enabling environment that's safe and protective, where the project works with community leaders to recognize faith leaders, as well as practitioners of these harmful practices, to recognize those practices, those attitudes that are harmful to girls and boys that they may be either directly or indirectly promoting. And from there, like work with them to better understand the roles that they play to protect children. And this would also involve, you know, like making sure that they are aware of those child protection structures and can provide certain types of support to these children. And then lastly is around strengthening existing of creation of child protection structures, whereby like we have worked with local governance to affirm those structures and also ensure that the laws are enforced that protect children.
Thank you so much for sharing and FGM and female genital mutilation, for those who don't know the definition. I learned a lot about when I came to Global Impact from our charity partners. And I think, say what you talked about, like the understanding the why, to understand what the why is just so important.
Yeah. I just want to say quickly, like since 2019, we've provided girls with dignity kits. We've reached almost 800,000 persons with messaging around protection. We've recruited nearly 600 community members to participate in economic empowerment activities, specifically savings groups. And we've worked with almost 700 local council, local governance representatives around child protection. And lastly, I just want to highlight while this like success is around programming, we do have a personal success. I reformed Cutter, a former practitioner of FGM. She came in contact with the project and it changed her mindset. And there was a film that was made about this and how the project had impacted her. And we have a trailer, as well as if you'd like to see the short film, is about 30 minutes. The link is also provided. So I'll end there.
Yeah, and I've seen that video and it is incredible. So I encourage all of you to watch it and to learn more. Zaid, I know that World Vision also has an office in Afghanistan, and I know this conflict is top of mind for many of us right now. Can you tell us a little bit about your work in this region and how it's impacted your work and support for women and girls?
Sure. Thank you, Brittany. So World Vision has worked in Afghanistan in the western parts of it for about 20 years and continue to do so. The focus of our work is really just ensuring that, you know, children's needs are being met. And in terms of like the sector areas, we focused around nutrition, food security, livelihoods, as well as health, and also ensuring that there's access to clean water and hygiene. Some of the work that we've done is, for example, within our health activities, we've made sure that midwives as well as community health workers have been trained to promote proper nutrition, access to clean water, as well as highlighting the importance of latrines. We've also worked to have established early childhood / care development spaces to ensure that children are prepared for their entry into a formal education. We've also worked with households and within like women to ensure that they have access to information around livelihoods. So like, having like home-based gardens, engaging in, safe hygiene practices. So we are, as I said, continuing to work. We have had some pause on some activities where, through engagement with the Taliban, we are in the process of hopefully lifting some of these activities soon. But yeah.
Great, thanks. Michelle, anything on plan side?
So while plan does not work in Afghanistan, we are very concerned about how women and girls are being treated under the Taliban. We are particularly concerned that not all girls have been allowed to return to school and are facing deteriorating humanitarian situation that is threatening hopes and dreams. I mean, what we have to keep in mind is that prior to just a couple of months ago, women and girls had over a decade of increased access to education, increased opportunity for employment, and we're experiencing much more empowerment. And now we're seeing that regress. And so plan supports all efforts being made to respect, both international humanitarian law, but as well as to support women and girls in Afghanistan. And we have called on the international community to act in solidarity with the girls and women of Afghanistan.
Great, thank you guys so much. Before I turn things over to our audience for questions, so remember to get your questions in. How can our attendees be global champions for women and girls at your organization? And Zaid, let's start with you.
Thank you, Brittany. Well, at World Vision, we have a campaign. It's actually a movement. It's called Strong Women, Strong World. And we really, through that Strong Women, Strong World, we aim to support women and girls to ensure that they live these healthy, productive, safe lives. And what is really unique about Strong Women, Strong World is that it's a movement, but it's not just like a movement for females, it's also a movement for males. And it's across all ages, actually. We have a next generation, which are a cohort of younger individuals who are interested in advancing these issues, but it's anyone in the spectrum who is supportive of addressing the needs of women and girls. Like really with Strong Women, Strong World, we abide with this, like we call it AIR philosophy, where we want you to, one, raise awareness, so bring attention to the issue. We want to also, work with you to influence, to expand your networks. And in turn, we want you to, create these relationships, not only with like peers, but also with like donors. And ideally with the final R, like to secure and direct those resources that can enhance the lives of women and girls. And we do have a couple, websites you could visit. One is, I can link them in the chat, but, you could visit the World Vision Philanthropy website to get this information around Strong Women, Strong World. You could also donate, and you could also email. But the idea is that, through Strong Women, Strong World, you know, it's this cohesive collective that wants to push for sustainable, effective development. And that when women and girls have equal rights, they have freedoms, they have equal opportunities, you know, their families and their communities are better cared for. They're enriched, and like the overall society is just more prosperous. So I'll stop there.
Great, thanks.
Okay, great. So I have a couple of options for you all. First, you could become an advocate. So you could join us in advocating for policies that remove barriers for girls to pursue whatever life path they choose. Plans advocates sign petitions, call their representatives, and receive information on policies that affect girls. You can sign up on our website, which I will drop in the chat. You could give differently this holiday season. So if you have that one person in your life that you never know what to get them for Christmas or for Hanukkah or during the holiday season, you could look at our Gifts of Hope catalog online. So for example, for $50, you could provide training for one girl to understand how to spot human traffickers, and job training so that girls are protected from trafficking and forced labor. $210 would provide education for an entire community to learn about preventing trafficking. So basically supporting a community to reduce instances of trafficking. A little bit under $1,500 would provide 10 girls with housing, counseling, education, and job training. And these girls would be survivors of trafficking, so this would help them reintegrate within their community. And as a bonus, your gift would not get stuck in shipping delays, which I think is going to be a challenge this holiday season. Another option is if you know young people in your life who maybe like I was when I was 14 and interested in helping others, but not really sure what that means or how they can do that, they could join our Youth Advisory Board. This is a group of young people from across the United States that provide input into plans programming and advocacy work. Again, I will share the link to our website in the chat so that you can learn more. And then finally, you can donate through your employee assistance program if your organization has one, so that PLAN can continue to work with girls across the world to remove the barriers that keep them from reaching their full potential. And I'd say those are the 4 key ways.
Those are great. Thank you all for sharing. And I hope it gives everyone a little something to ponder on as we close out the webinar pretty soon. But we have lots of great questions in the Q&A. So I'm going to go ahead and feed them to both of you. The first one is, what is one thing you think will be achieved or accomplished in your work in the next 5 years? It's dreaming big here, 5 years from now.
That is a really excellent and a really, really tough question.
It is.
Because I mean, the unfortunate reality is that while we are gaining ground every year, there's also always these sudden onset crises or shocks that tend to push us back down the hill a little bit. So for example, COVID-19, the COVID-19 pandemic, came out of nowhere and has reversed so many gains made in girls accessing education. So I don't know if I can say where I think we will be in 5 years, and that's unfortunate. What I would like to see, and I don't know if this is feasible, but what I would hope is that 5 years from now, we're able to make up some of the ground we lost because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's contingent on vaccine rollouts globally. That's contingent on the great work of organizations like PLAN and like World Vision continuing. But I would hope to see that within 5 years, we're able to find ourselves back where we were and moving forward.
That actually, Ursay, do you want to go next?
Oh, no. Well, I was just going to add, Michelle brought up some very valid points. I think also, what I would say is that with COVID-19, we also saw an increase in gender-based violence in various forms that were happening. And you also saw a downshift in livelihoods that women were engaged in, having to change, modify, or leave the workforce. So there probably have been some setbacks, but I would say I hope in 5 years' time, like I guess with also vaccine rollout, that we have even more partners towards promoting gender equality. And I think, people tend to think gender equality, like it's just women and girls, it's only women and girls, but it's like also involves like male engagement and also working with a variety of cross-section of actors, not just like say governments or foundations or multilaterals with communities. It's also like the community driven, the community led, the collectives that are part of this movement. And I think, yes, COVID-19 has probably slowed down some of that engagement, but there's a lot more, I think, movement in that direction of like really making sure that all members are at the table, that we are being inclusive, and that we are coming together to bring those different perspectives and how we see these issues and how we can address these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really segues perfectly into another question that was posed, and that is, what is something that has changed about your work because of COVID-19? So, I'm hearing some of the community-based approaches and really being able to learn from people on the ground has sometimes been a challenge. Can you speak a little more to that and other things that have changed?
Absolutely. Well, I think one of the key things has changed is, and here I'm speaking very much to humanitarian work. And I know they provided a great overview of the difference between development and humanitarian, but just to reiterate, humanitarian is looking at responding to both man-made and natural disasters. And so I think one of the things about COVID-19 is that it has meant that we have an increased reliance on the communities where we work. Humanitarian work, because we are responding to sudden onset crises, can very much be very hands-on with humanitarian workers directly implementing programs. But because of COVID-19, because of travel restrictions and not being able to necessarily get to the locations where we work, we've worked much more closely in partnership with communities. And I think that's an excellent opportunity. We've also worked more closely with local organizations. And these are really key opportunities that we should be building on and learning from. And what we also need to be mindful of is, how are we doing this work without it being exploitative of those communities or organizations, but empowering and strengthening them. Localization is a very key buzzword currently in I believe, both the humanitarian and development sectors. And what that means is working more closely with local non-governmental organizations and national non-governmental organizations to build on, to use their expertise as being from these locations and empowering them to be delivering this aid, and to kind of decolonize how aid is provided, which is a huge task and something that we need to be working on, not just in cooperation with these local organizations, but actually actively listening to them and having them the lead. And we've seen this increased reliance during COVID-19. And what I think we should do is take advantage of that momentum and really make sure that we're doing this in an ethical and sustainable manner. But that's been one of the big changes. I mean, and I'll stop there because I could go on and I don't want to take up time from Zaid responding or other questions, but I think that's an excellent question.
No, that is an excellent question. And just to piggyback on what Michelle said, I think what COVID-19 also provided some insight into, because like I said, a lot of our work is community driven. We've been in communities for a long time working with leaders, but it's access to certain resources, particularly around the electronical and digital divide. And I think that's been a challenge in terms of like technology and if you're trying to you have to hold these meetings remotely, or you have to, you want to bring everyone to the table, but due to social distancing, you can only allow certain people in the room or a certain number of people in the room. So I think, it's made us be more creative in how we create and how we convene and how we collectively organize and how we collaborate. And so that's the advantage, I think, of COVID-19, but and it's forced us to be like I said, more nimble and more flexible in that aspect.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much for presenting today. We are at time, so I'm going to wrap us up real quick. So thank all of you for attending as well. I know I feel inspired by the work of these two organizations, what they're doing to lift women and girls up, and I hope you do too. I invite you to support World Vision, Plan International, and other partners making a huge impact in this area. You can do so by giving directly to them, giving through your workplace to access your corporate match, and by giving to the Global Impact Women and Girls Fund. We're going to drop some links in the chat. Every dollar makes an impact. So a $10 reoccurring monthly gift given over the course of a year sponsors a loan to launch a women-owned small business, or a one-time gift of $50 funds a community service to fight gender-based violence. So if you want to learn more about our partners and about women and girls, visit cherry.org/give, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.